Hi, welcome to Digging for Truth, where we explore the reliability and truthfulness of the Bible. Today, Dr. Jason Lyle from the Biblical Science Institute joins us to talk about astronomy and the Bible. Dr. Lyle has a PhD in astrophysics from the University of Colorado. Jason, we're glad to have you on the show for the first time. Welcome to Digging for Truth.
Well, thanks. Good to be with you.
All right. Well, we're very, very excited to have our first astronomer on our program. Sir, a PhD studied astrophysics, physicist. Before we kind of get into the material that we want to cover today, I thought it'd be great if you could just share for a few moments a little of your background and why you got into astronomy.
I've loved space, outer space, since I was a little kid. I just really enjoy that stuff. And so I knew from my childhood that I wanted to go into science. I like to understand how things work. The Lord's just put that in me. And of course, I've loved the Lord since I was a little child. I received Christ as my Savior as I was very young, and I knew I wanted to live my life for Him. And it's really cool because I get to do both. I get to do science, and I get to do it in a way that glorifies God, which is reason science works, is because God upholds His universe in a consistent fashion. And when you study science, the appropriate response is to worship the Creator. And so I love that I get to do that. I love that I get to talk to people about how science confirms the Bible, in particular biblical creation. But I went out and got my bachelor's in double majored in physics and astronomy, and then minored in mathematics. And then I went to the University of Colorado, where I got my PhD in astrophysics. I really enjoyed the experience. And now what I do is I go around studying astrophysics and teaching people about science in general, astrophysics in particular, but how that science confirms biblical creation.
That's excellent. It's a combination of having expertise, but then being able to communicate it. Take it to the pew, as it were. As R.C. Sproul used to say, you have to be able to do both, and that's why I appreciate your ministry so much. You came and spoke at our banquet last year, and it was a great success. So let's start to delve into some details. You know, a lot of people say the Bible is not a science textbook, and technically speaking, of course, that's correct. Mm-hmm. But it does describe the cosmos in certain ways. Maybe you could share some passages from Scripture about that and compare it to what we know about the universe and the study of astronomy.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. The Bible's not a science textbook. Science textbooks, we have to update them every few years when we learn that we got some things wrong. The Bible will never need to be updated. God got it right the first time. And because it's inspired by God, because it's not just any book. I mean, it's written by men, but men that were carried along by the Holy Spirit. And as a result, what the Bible affirms is always true. And that includes statements that it makes regarding the nature of the universe, the nature of Earth, the nature of the stars, and so on. And the Bible does occasionally touch on those topics, even though that's not its main purpose. And so, for example, when the Bible speaks about the nature of the earth being spherical, as it does in Job chapter 26, verse 10, where the Bible describes the earth's terminator. That's the terminator is where light stops on the earth or terminates. And that's where evening and morning occur. And it turns out the Bible says that terminator is circular, it's round. And that only happens on a spherical planet. Any other three-dimensional surface will not always have a circular terminator. And so when God describes the boundary of day and night, the boundary of light and darkness, as occurring on the waters of the earth, because the earth's mostly water in terms of its surface area, when the Bible describes that as being a circle, it's describing the earth as being spherical. And that's in Job. Job, we think, is written around 2000 BC. And so the neat thing about that is, as far as I can tell, all the pagan cultures at the time believed in a flat earth. It wasn't until around 500 BC that some of the non-Jewish cultures started accepting that the earth is round. The Greeks started accepting that the earth is spherical, but the Bible had it right earlier than that. Or the fact that the earth hangs in space. It literally hangs on nothing. That's described in Job chapter 26, verse 7. God hangs the earth on nothing. And of course, we have pictures of the earth from space now that show it hanging on nothing. I mean, it's a poetic description of the nature of gravity and how the earth floats in space. So those are just two quick examples of scientific knowledge that's contained in the Bible that's accurate. We have to all agree the Bible got it right. And yet at the time those were written, the secularists would say, no, we know the earth's flat and it's supported by these pillars. Well, no, the Bible indicates that the earth's round and floats in space. And that's just neat. Or the fact that the universe is apparently expanding, that the galaxies are all moving away from each other. That's suggested in Isaiah 40:22, where it says that God stretches out the heavens like a curtain, spreads them out as a tent to dwell in, as if the universe is getting bigger. And that was discovered by scientific means in the 1920s. And so again, the Bible had it right thousands of years in advance. Isaiah's somewhere around 700 BC, we think. And so long before we had the scientific equipment to discover that, because you need telescopes and spectroscopes to determine the redshifts of galaxies to see that they're moving away, the Bible seems to have recorded that information. And so those are just a few quick examples of astronomy that the Bible mentions, and it gets it exactly right. And today we'd have to all admit the Bible got it right.
Yeah, that's a nice survey. One other one that you touch upon in your presentations that really is, for me, is personally one of the most striking ones, and that is the number of stars. Talk about that a little bit, what the Bible says about that, and of course what we know now from modern astronomy.
Yeah, the Bible uses the number of stars as an analogy for a humanly uncountable number. And so when the Bible describes Abraham's offspring as the stars of heaven, it says which cannot be, or as the sand which is on the seashore, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So indicating human beings, we can't count the number of sand grains on all the beaches of the earth, nor can we count the number of stars in the night sky. And so that's a good analogy. But it might not have seemed like such a great analogy when it was first written, because the number of stars you can see naked eye, somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000. If you stayed up all night and you have superb vision, maybe 10,000 stars. And that's a large number. And so it's an okay analogy, but you can count to 10,000. And then in 1608, the telescope was invented. In 1610, Galileo had made a pretty good telescope, and he pointed it up at the Milky Way, that cloudy band that we see in the summer skies. And he found that cloud is actually billions of stars. And so we now estimate that there's about 100 billion stars in our own galaxy. That is humanly uncountable. You can't count to 100 billion in your lifetime. And we now know that our galaxy is one of hundreds of billions of other galaxies. And each one of those could contain 100 billion stars, some less, some quite a bit more. So the number of stars in the sky, it's definitely uncountable. What a great analogy. And it's something that the Bible indicated a long time before we had discovered the magnitude of the truth of that claim.
Yeah, it's incredible in the creation account too. The mention of the creation of the stars almost is like a footnote. And the verb appears at the beginning of a sentence to focus on the moon and the sun, and and the stars also, like as a side note, but God creates trillions and trillions and trillions of stars. It's a remarkable testimony to his immensity and his infinite power. It's quite extraordinary. Well, Dr. Lyle, we have to take a break, and we'll be right back after this message. ABR is excited to announce the publication of Volume 2 from our excavations at Khirbet el-Maqadir. The volume details archaeological remains from about 350 BC to the 8th century. This includes a New Testament village that may have been visited by Jesus. Over 400 pages of analysis, photos, and maps. You can pick up a copy today by visiting BibleArchaeology.org. Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. I'm Henry Smith. I'm here with Dr. Jason Lyle. He's an astrophysicist, an expert on the cosmos, outer space, stars, planets, and so on. All right, Dr. Lyle, we want to talk about a new piece of technology that was developed recently called the James Webb telescope. It's really, really fascinating. It's a wonderful advancement in being able to study the cosmos. Tell us about it and some of the predictions that you made related to it. I won't say any more. I'll let you do it.
Okay, yeah. So we got this wonderful new instrument. The James Webb Space Telescope launched in December 2021, and then finally started taking in data in July 2022. And it's designed to be able to see galaxies that are farther away than what the Hubble Space Telescope can detect. And the reason for that is it can see in infrared wavelengths of light that are much longer, that are below what we can see, too long for us to see, too long for the Hubble to detect. But galaxies that are far away, their light's been redshifted, it's been stretched, and the James Webb Space Telescope can detect that. So it can detect these galaxies that are very, very far away. And one of the goals of this spacecraft, at least for those who were secularists, they wanted to see the first galaxies that formed, because in the secular view, as you look farther out into space, it's kind of like looking back in time. That's not exactly true, but for the sake of argument, let's say that they're right about that. And that being the case, the farther out you look, you're looking back further in time. There ought to be a time where there weren't any galaxies. We all agree on that. And so there should be a distance beyond which you shouldn't see any galaxies. And that corresponds to a redshift, a stretching factor of about 14. And so the secularists were expecting that you really shouldn't see galaxies beyond a redshift of 14. And you should see very few at redshifts approaching that. And the few galaxies that you should see should be kind of baby galaxies, because you're looking back to a time when galaxies were just starting to form, and they're supposed to form small and then grow and then gain structure as they merge with each other and so on. So the idea is the farthest galaxies, there shouldn't be any at a certain distance. The ones that you do see close to redshift 14 should be small, lumpy, irregular galaxies, and they should only be made of hydrogen, helium, and lithium, the three lightest elements, because in the Big Bang view, the Big Bang's only supposed to produce those three elements. And so the first stars should consist of only those lightest three elements. I thought, well, I don't believe any of that, because I don't believe the Big Bang. I believe these galaxies were spoken into existence by God and that they were fully functional from the beginning. They were made as adults, just like Adam and Eve were made as adults. They were created that way. And so I thought I'll make some predictions too. And I did this back in January 2022. You can look on our website and read the predictions that I made. And mine were basically the opposite of what the secularists were expecting. I predicted that there would be lots of galaxies well beyond a redshift of 14, because I don't believe that we're necessarily looking back in time. I believe that we're looking farther out into space. And I don't see any reason why God would stop making galaxies at a redshift of 14. So I predicted they'll go well beyond that. And since I don't believe we're looking back to a time closer to the Big Bang, I believe that those galaxies should be adults. They should be fully formed, massive galaxies, lots of structure, maybe spiral galaxies. I didn't give specifics, but I just said mature, fully functioning galaxies, not babies, not low mass and clumpy, but high mass, comparable to nearby galaxies. And I predicted that these distant galaxies would have heavy elements in them, things like oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, the stuff that we're made of, because nearby galaxies do. And so I don't believe in the Big Bang, that it just produced the three lightest elements. I think God made those earliest stars with a similar composition to nearby stars. And lo and behold, in July of 2022, we received the first data back from the James Webb Deep Field, where it's looking out to these farthest galaxies. And it indeed found galaxies beyond a redshift of 14, and lots of them. And so the secularists were wrong about that. My creationist predictions were right. And then it found that these even the ones that are at these distances were massive and well structured. There's evidence of spiral galaxies. There's evidence of barred spiral galaxies, which are supposed to take billions of years to form. And yet we find them out at these incredible distances. That's what I would expect as a biblical creationist. And James Webb Space Telescope has an instrument on it that can detect the elements that made the light by breaking down their light into a spectrum and looking for the atomic fingerprint. And it detected heavy elements like oxygen in these most distant galaxies. So in the three predictions that I made, they were correct. The three predictions that the secularists made were wrong, and they've been refuted by the James Webb Space Telescope. And the cool thing was, too, I even predicted how they would respond. I predicted that the secularists would, instead of giving up the Big Bang, because they need that, the only alternative is there's a God who created. Well, I mean, that's the Big Bang's the standard secular model. So they're not going to give that up. I predicted that they'll just push back galaxy formation to an even earlier time. They'll say, well, I guess we didn't go out far enough. Galaxies must have formed even earlier. And that is exactly what they're saying. So it's interesting. The Bible not only tells me about the nature of space, it tells me something about human nature and how human beings tend to respond when they're confronted with contrary data and they have a commitment to a secular worldview. They don't just accept the evidence, they explain it away. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So 2022 was a very fun year. It was a very exciting year to be a biblical creationist, because we got to see these distant galaxies that confirm biblical creation and really challenge the Big Bang view.
That's very good. You did what we call an internal critique. And we're going to talk about that more in our next segment, where you get inside the presuppositions of the opposing view and then you kind of like get inside there and show how that doesn't work. We're going to develop that some more in our next segment. But what's interesting to me is now, are they basically trying to expand the age of the universe as a result of this? Is that what I hear you saying? Tell us the standard age. Tell us what they're saying. Give us a little more.
So they really can't. Most of them are not going to take that approach. There have been one or two that have tried that.
Okay.
But for the most part, they can't make it any older, because the expansion rate that we've measured, the expansion rate of the universe, is something that we've measured. And that puts an upper limit on the age of the universe, an upper limit at 13.8 billion years. So they can't make it any older than that. So what they got to do is try to squeeze galaxy formation into a much shorter period of time between their view of when the Big Bang happened and these farthest galaxies that we can see. So that's the standard view. Now, I have seen a couple of secular astrophysicists that have tried to push back the age, but then you have to give a different explanation for the redshifts. You have to say it's not due to expansion of the universe. One approach that I've seen is they've said, well, they've tried to combine what's called the tired light model, the idea that light just kind of loses energy as it goes along, and that explains the redshift.
Okay.
They've tried to combine that with expansion, and that doubles the age of the universe, and that gives them a little more time to play with. But I don't think that's going to catch on. I don't think most secularists will accept that, because it's needlessly complicated. You're combining two different explanations for redshift, and that goes against Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is usually the best.
Sure, yeah, and it seems to me that there would be a lot of, as a non-specialist, a lot of unintended consequences from trying to do all that, a domino effect of things that probably wouldn't work out in their modeling. Well, believe it or not, Dr. Lyle, we have to go to another break, and we'll be right back to finish up with more evidences, the glory of God and creation.
In a culture of intense Bible-denying skepticism, Associates for Biblical Research exists to strengthen followers of Jesus by affirming the authority of the Bible. Our archaeological fieldwork and original research form a strong foundation in upholding the reliability of the Scriptures for students or anyone asking if they can really trust the Bible. Please visit our website and partner with us by joining our prayer team or financially supporting this ministry. And thank you for standing with us.
Hi, thank you for joining us for Digging for Truth. We're in our final segment with Dr. Jason Lyle. Okay, Jason, you did an internal critique of the predictions of the James Webb Telescope observations, what the secularists would say, what you felt the creationists would say. There's more, though, that we can do with that, and that has to do with other evidences that show the universe doesn't seem to be as old as the secular scientists say. Let's hit up with some examples, because they're really cool.
Okay, yeah, and I need to explain a little bit how we do this, because there's some confusion there. I'm a presuppositionalist, and one aspect of that is I believe in using the Proverbs 26:4-5 approach. The Bible gives us some instructions on how to defend it, and how to argue and how to debate these things. And Proverbs 26:4-5 teaches that we're not to embrace the foolish standards of the unbeliever, but we do temporarily accept them only for the purpose of showing that they lead to absurdity. And so we don't embrace the foolish presuppositions of the unbeliever, or we would be like him. So don't answer the fool according to his folly, or be like him. But we do answer him according to his folly, so that he can't be wise in his own eyes, so that he sees where his foolish presuppositions go. Now, the way I would apply this to, for example, the age of the universe, which is a presuppositional question, because whenever we talk about the age of something, we have to make certain assumptions about the past, about rates and processes. And so the way I approach the issue is the way I believe the Bible tells us to, which is I don't embrace the secular presuppositions, but I do show that they would lead to absurdity. Okay, and so what are the secular presuppositions when it comes to making a guess about the age of something? The secular presuppositions are naturalism and uniformitarianism. And those are both a matter of degree, but naturalism is the belief that nature's all that there is. And so you can't have a God that just supernaturally speaks things into existence. The secularists would eliminate that at the outset as a possibility. Now, I would argue that's illogical, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to embrace that only to show that it leads to absurdity. And then secondly, uniformitarianism, which is the idea that present rates and conditions are reflective of past rates and conditions, that unless there's really compelling evidence to the contrary, you can assume that the present is like the past, or the present is the key to the past. Use present rates you assume that the past rates were like that, and then you can estimate the age of something using those two presuppositions. Now, I reject those presuppositions, but what I'm going to do when I analyze the evidence is I'm going to temporarily accept those to show that there are many instances where they lead to an age that is much less than the secular accepted age for the solar system or the universe. For example, the internal heat of the giant planets. Jupiter actually gives off twice as much energy as it receives from the sun. It's getting 1 unit of energy from the sun, and it's giving away 2. It's radiating that heat into space. And if you think about it, it can't do that forever because it's constantly losing energy. If it's giving away twice as much as it gets, it'll run out of energy. And now it's a big planet. It's 10 times the diameter of the Earth. And so in 6,000 years, it can do that. It can give away twice as much as it gets, and it still has plenty of energy left. But if it were really 4.5 billion years old, it should have run out of energy a long time ago. And so that's an indication that Jupiter is not nearly as old as the secularists believe. They believe it's 4.5 billion years old, but it should have run out of energy a long time ago. Now, they could rescue their worldview from the evidence by saying, well, the rate was much different in the past. But then that would violate their own assumption that present rates and conditions are like past rates and conditions.
Uniform.
So it would violate their uniformitarianism, which is the only reason they believe in billions of years in the first place, is because they assume that in other places to get the billions of years. Or they could argue that God supernaturally intervenes, but then that would violate their view of naturalism. So if I embrace their view, I can refute their view. And so it's devastating.
Excellent. That is very good. So let's highlight a couple other examples from the world of astronomy. This is one of my favorites: the strength and decay of the Earth's magnetic field. Yeah.
Now the Earth's magnetic field, it's complicated, but basically the Earth has what's called a dipole magnetic field that's caused by electrical current in Earth's core. And electrical current, maybe you've made a magnet. When I was young, you can make a coil of wire, and I would touch it to a battery, and you can pick up nails with it. It's pretty neat. So that's how magnets work. Electricity will make magnetism. That's happening in the Earth's core. And just as magnets lose energy over time, the Earth's magnetic field loses energy over time. It's decaying. And the energy, we can measure the rate at which the Earth's magnetic field is decaying. And we've been able to measure that for the last century and a half, because we've had instruments to measure the magnetic field since then, and it's decaying. There's no doubt about it. It's losing energy. It's not just that the strength is diminishing, but the energy is being reduced. And we can extrapolate that backward, and based on physics principles, it should be an exponential decay, which means you run it back in time, it'll get really big. Back at creation, 6,000 years ago, the magnetic field would have been 20 times stronger than it is today. So compasses would work really well at creation. Right. That would give us increased protection from cosmic rays, things that are damaging the DNA. So that may be one reason why people were healthier back then, among others. But if you extrapolate it back, even 60,000 years, the Earth's magnetic field would have been stronger than that of a neutron star, which is the strongest magnetic field in the universe that we know of. And that's enough to rip the atoms of your body apart. So, I mean, even before that happened, to rip the iron right out of your blood, because iron is ferromagnetic. So what that shows is the Earth's magnetic field can't even be 60,000 years old, let alone 4.5 billion. And again, the secularists could rescue that by saying, well, it recharges itself somehow. But we don't see that happening today. So that would violate uniformitarianism. And they argue, well, there's a dynamo that the magnetic field flips over time. We do think it flipped during the flood year because there was a mechanism. The Earth's, the continents are being pushed apart and so on. Yeah, we think that happened, but there's no mechanism to do that today. So we don't think that's going to happen again. We don't think the Earth's magnetic field is going to flip again. It just wanders a little bit over time. So very compelling evidence that the Earth is less than 60,000 years old.
Yeah, that's very good. Well, we wanted to cover more, Dr. Lyle. We're going to give the audience some information that points to other evidences like spiral galaxies and such things. But unfortunately, we've run out of time, my friend. I am so sorry. we're so grateful that you came on the show just to share about these important things from the world of astronomy. It's just so important to understand that God has created the universe in this beautiful way. It's consistent with the Bible. Appreciate all you do, and thanks for coming on the show, Jason.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
God bless you. Well, friends, you just got a little taste of the glory of astronomy, the beauty of the universe, the size, the scope, and that what God has created is consistent with what is in His Word. And we thank you for watching. Appreciate. We ask for you to pray for Dr. Lyle as he continues with his research and ministry. Thank you for watching Digging for Truth.
Digging for Truth is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.